Welcome back, guys. Berek here, Equity Podcast. Our goal is to help you invest in yourself. Today, I got Dave Jenkins, Old Man Jenkins.
Hey guys.
We're going to be talking about programming. So this is going to be high level programming, like just kind of like our general philosophy on what we're doing, why we do those things, and just get a little bit of insight into it's not just random workouts, right? It's varied workouts. And we're just going to talk a little bit about our why, and then I hopefully don't make any promises, but hopefully this might we'll come back and we'll do some quarterly stuff. It's like, hey, this quarter, this is what we're focusing on, this is what you're going to see, and get a little bit more granular into like what we're doing. All right. So first thing, Dave, what's our general philosophy when it's coming to the programming?
So, we follow the CrossFit Metcon approach, right? Which is the line that I think I heard best that sort of solidified it for me was, we want to blur the line between strength and conditioning. CrossFit is a strength and conditioning program, but in a lot of people's programming, they'll program strength, they'll program conditioning, and keep those as two separate components of their training. But in the Metcon approach, we blend it all together. So we want that strength, conditioning to all be blended into one workout, and that's sort of the secret sauce to get that intensity that basically gets us our growth.
Right. So like in a traditional strength conditioning world, what you'll see is like, all right, we're going to go do our back squats, our bench, our curls, whatever that is, and then we'll go out into the field and do our wind sprints. Right. And then, with the CrossFit methodology, what we're trying to do here is, hey, we're going to do deadlifts, burpees, and jumping rope, and that's going to be a heavy deadlift relative, and we're going to do some other stuff with that.
Right. Instead of that old approach where let's do our 10 or 12 sets of chest work and then go hit the treadmill for 20 minutes, right? Let's kind of do all this together.
And it lets us get a lot done in a short period of time.
Very efficient, right? A very efficient approach.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's been, especially in the early years, like pre-2018, like why it was just blowing up so fast. And one of the other things that I like to think of with the general programming is I want to be fit for life. No matter what life throws at me, I want to be able to do that thing. And we'll kind of get a little bit more into like some ideas behind that, but when we're doing these things like deadlifts, we need to be able to pick the dog food off the floor, or we want to be able to run in the street with our kids playing street hockey, or we want to climb up onto the roof and clean the gutters. Like, we want to be able to do all those things, and those are the things we're doing in here.
Sure. And there certainly is a place too for separating strength and conditioning. We do that occasionally, as everybody knows, but in general, 75% of what we do is kind of blending all that together.
So that's kind of like our big picture view of just like what we're trying to do. What are some of the concepts that we use to kind of help us? What are some of the concepts that are helping us model what we want to do?
So we rely a lot on basically the various CrossFit definitions of fitness. As we know, fitness is sort of an ill-defined word out there, right? Nobody has like the perfect definition of what fitness means. So CrossFit kind of approaches it from a few different angles. One being having a well-rounded set of general physical skills, things such as strength, power, speed, coordination, flexibility, balance, coordination, agility, all those sorts of things. I don't know if I hit all 10 there.
Yeah, that's pretty close. That's pretty damn good. Yeah.
But so naturally you want to do movements. If that's how one way you're defining fitness, you want to have movements in your workouts that are going to improve each of those areas, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I literally just did a video on the 10 general physical skills. If you haven't checked that out, check it out. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be balanced across all of those things. So, if the deadlift is always where we struggle, in order to get fitter, spending time on the deadlift is going to get us fitter. If you're a really good runner, spending more time running isn't necessarily going to get you any fitter.
Right.
Gotcha.
Working on your weaknesses is always going to be more beneficial than working on your strengths.
Right. And in terms of getting over, or in terms of getting to a higher fitness level, and defining fitness in this one model of fitness is the 10 general physical skills. Right.
Yeah, and also, CrossFit views fitness from the perspective of how well are you at recruiting the various energy systems that your body uses to allow you to do things, right?
Right.
To take a 5-mile walk is different than sprinting 100 meters, right? Or, lifting a 500-pound deadlift, right? All these things require different types of energy systems. And the way we sort of attack that is through various time domains and various intensities in the way we program. So a 30-minute workout is typically not going to be as intense as a 7-minute AMRAP, right? Where intensity is sort of the overriding goal.
Yeah.
So our body uses different energy systems to allow us to do these different tasks, and the only way to really capture that is to have workouts that cover a variety of time domains and a variety of intensities.
Yeah. So we have that like 1 to 3 second lift, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be really short, really intense. You have that mid-range, kind of like where most CrossFit stuff is. That 6 to 12 minute range. That's kind of like our real sweet spot. That's where you're probably going to get the most bang for your buck. And then you got that longer time domain. I know all the endurance people are just rolling their eyes when we say a long workout is 15 minutes or longer. But then you get that on the other side, and it doesn't really matter how many energy systems there are. We want to be proficient in them.
Right.
There's just 3 that are generally recognized, and we don't need to go into specifically on what those are. We just have it. So, is there any other concepts we want to touch on?
Yeah. So also, we want to look at a variety of movement patterns, right? Because in order to be fit, you have to be able to move your body throughout space in different ways.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, being fit for life requires that as well. If you want to be able to navigate a ladder and clean a gutter without falling and breaking your neck, right? You have to have some agility.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, when you're working out, you're doing these things under intensity and to fatigue. And so, we want to make sure that we have a variety of movement patterns, not only to make sure that we're well-rounded in terms of how we move, but also to keep our bodies safe, right? So that we're not hitting the same movement patterns over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's difficult to program 6 days a week and not overlap movement patterns, but we can also overcome that by having different loads, different implements, that we use in order to, so say we hinge 3 times a week. Well, if we do it with different loads, different implements, we can sort of cut down on some of that redundancy.
Yeah. And also like that's part of the reason like why I started this was because I was getting bored at the gym. Right? I was doing the same workout pretty much every week. So now I can hit the same movement pattern twice a week, but do it in a different way. Right. And it keeps it fun and exciting, and I just don't get that fatigue of doing it. Yeah.
It's a good point that you bring up because that's kind of like, if you really want to think about it, what are we all doing this for? Obviously we want to be fit, but we also want to have fun, right? And so the programming should be fun, and I think that by keeping it fresh, keeping it mixed up, that variety makes it fun. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of coming on to the next part, there's when we're developing our program, there are a couple things that we will really want to focus on, and we kind of touched the base on it a little bit with the general physical skills, but I think there's a little bit of a higher picture on that. So what are the things that we're kind of using to develop a well-rounded human being?
So different people have different philosophies on this sort of thing, but I personally believe that strength is foundational to any sort of a fitness program, because a strong body is not only a body that can do the movements that's being asked of it, but can also do it safely without giving us less likelihood of being injured, right? So building up that musculoskeletal system, to me, is tantamount to the type of things that we're asking ourselves to do out there on the floor, right? So I believe that strength is foundational to everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I also find that like most people can go out and go for a run, right? You can go bike, you can get outside or get a treadmill, and you can build up some cardiovascular endurance. And it's like, is there technique in those things where you probably should have some coaching on those? Absolutely. However, when you start adding different implements like barbells and kettlebells and whatever, when we're trying to get strength, when we're picking up external loads, there's so much technique there, and there's a somewhat higher risk factor as well. So like having somebody there to make sure you're moving well is going to help. Like people have a tendency to be scared to start strength training, and it's not really that risky, but they just feel better when they have somebody else that can help them on that journey, right?
Absolutely.
Now, on the flip side, we can talk about like how, running and that type of stuff, you can get kind of like the volume injuries, but most people just feel more comfortable going out for a run versus going out and picking up something heavy. They just don't have that comfort level.
Absolutely. It's easier to self-modulate an activity like running or biking than it is picking up something really heavy, right?
Yeah.
One mistake picking up something heavy can be catastrophic. Right?
Yeah.
You're typically not going to do something like that running or biking unless you fall or something like that, but absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that totally. Like strong people are harder to kill.
That's right.
And there's so many other studies talking about like bone density and all those things. Like I think one of the what's the best movement? When I first started this, it was probably a squat, like some kind of squat. And then I was like, well, we want to get overhead, so maybe actually a clean and jerk might be. And which actually isn't a terrible thing, but actually like the best thing that if I could only pick one movement and do it for the rest of my life, it'd probably be some kind of weighted carry, right? Because you get the load and you also get to walk. So that weighted carry kind of kills two birds with one stone, and where strength is so important by carrying something, and then just getting a walk in is such a good thing as well.
Yeah, very functional.
Yeah,
very functional. Yeah, and then so I think also the thing to consider too is trying to develop the skill base that we have here for our athletes and across CrossFit. When we say strength is foundational, well, foundational to what? Well, remember, really, as we said earlier, the secret sauce to CrossFit is the intensity, right? It's getting fit, doing less overall time.
Yeah.
Time in work. So intensity, as we've learned, basically means power, right? The power output that you're generating. And so strength is a fundamental element of power, right? It's the load that you're moving, but in how much time, right?
Right.
And so our ability to generate power is also significantly based on strength.
Yeah.
Not to mention as an impediment to what we're trying to do. So a good example that I always like to think about, really it's two that I give everybody, is lack of strength is an impediment to things such as, imagine trying to do a heavy clean if you don't have adequate leg strength.
Right.
You're going to be severely limited, right? Your clean is going to be limited by how much leg strength you have. Likewise, so many people want to get pull-ups, right? I mean, so many people want to be able to do a pull-up, and what typically is the impediment to them getting pull-ups?
Yeah, that's strength.
They don't have that pulling strength, right? And so by building that strength base, it's foundational from the standpoint of what it does for your body, but also in leading into the skill set that we want to try to develop as CrossFitters or as athletes.
Yeah, and that power and speed, like those two, like that's literally in the definition of fitness, right? Work capacity goes broad time and middle domains, and work capacity is how much work can you do in a certain amount of time.
Exactly.
And that's distance times force over time. Like that is power. I think I got that right. Right. Power output is fitness. Like that's what we are doing.
Absolutely.
Right. So we can be stronger. So we can move that weight faster. We could be more cardiovascular. Have that cardiovascular endurance that we need to move that bar faster. But if you don't have the strength to move that bar, it ain't going anywhere.
With no strength, you have no power, basically, right? So.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it plays into our gymnastics as well, right? We ask our bodies, as we said earlier, to move, in a variety of ways. Whether it's pulling ourselves up and over a bar or being able to squat on one leg. All these different types of things we're asking our body to do. Again, would you want to, ask somebody to try a pistol if they don't have the adequate leg strength to do that? No, absolutely not, right? Or you're certainly not going to be able to do a bar muscle up or a ring muscle up if you can't do a pull up, right? So it's
the same thing, yeah. The funny thing is, you mentioned the leg strength. We literally had a member who goes hiking all the time. This actually might be the most rewarding member story I've ever heard in my entire life. But in terms of equity, it was amazing. So we have a relatively new member who started, and they go on hikes all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and they are in their 60s, and whenever they go on hikes, the worst part about the hike is having to use a porta potty. All right, and it was just always a little bit of anxiety and just tough to do. And now, since she's been at the gym getting the strength, lifting up some heavy things, she doesn't worry about it anymore. She has the leg strength to hover, so she doesn't have to. I mean, that is literally why I do this. Like, this is why we do this, to be able to do stuff like that. Like, it made her life better, which is awesome. And strength was the reason for it.
I've never heard that as an outcome, but hey, it's as good as any.
Dude,
right?
It's amazing. I love it. So what? Any other concepts that we're using for well-rounded development?
I just think that basically, to kind of tie it all together, that I think that all of the elements are important, but you sort of have to start at the beginning. You have to walk before you can run, right? And run before you can, jump, and all these good things. So I just think that really starting with a good strength base and then building into those power and gymnastics movements in sequence or in a progression, I think is how people typically develop. So that's how I kind of like to think about the programming. When I think about, across a week, the first thing that I think about is, are we getting enough strength in this week, right? And then kind of go from there.
It just kind of, I just thought about this. Like, I think a perfect way to think about this is, what does everybody, if somebody says CrossFit, what do people think of? Generally, it's kipping pull-ups, right?
Yeah.
And why do we do those? The reason we do those is because we're more powerful. We can do more work in less time, right? But what do we want before we do those things?
Strict pull-ups.
We want strict movements. We want the strength, because if we don't have the strength to do a strict pull-up, we probably don't have the strength to keep our shoulder in a safe place.
Right.
So that's like a perfect example of us needing that strength in order to build the capacity to do some other things.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Absolutely.
All right. So now we're going to kind of switch gears just a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit more of like our structure of the workout. Our structure of the year. So what's our structure for the year look like?
Yeah, so I took over the programming in August, so we didn't really get a full picture of a whole year, but sort of my vision of the year kind of goes like this. So we're post-open, post-quarterfinals. Typically, in our gym, that's where our seasons end, right? For those that that do the open and so forth, we typically end right at the quarterfinals level. And so, starting the year kind of from that point, I think of the first quarter following that as having a little bit of a strength focus. Now, let me qualify that by saying that all year long, we're focusing on GPP, right? General Physical Preparedness. We do CrossFit style programming all year long. So when we're talking about these focuses, we're talking about sort of a slight bias, meaning you'll see a little bit more than this than you typically would in other parts of the year. But we're doing all these things all year long.
Right.
So let me just make that kind of clear first. But immediately following the open, I like to think about the first quarter as being a little bit of a strength focus, where we're doing those things that we've just talked about, right? Where we're going to do a lot of isolated strength movements. We might, you'll see things such as 5x5 back squats, deadlifts, bench press, shoulder pressing with progressive loading from week to week to week. And we'll try to incorporate those into metcons at times as well. Yeah. But we'll definitely make sure we're getting the focus there. So we call that the spring and summer jacked and tan cycle, right? Make sure
jacked and tan,
get our beach bodies going and all that kind of stuff.
That kind of reminds me, like, it's almost, we're not going to get into the tracks right now. We're not going to dive deep into that, but that very much sounds like kind of like that train track that we have. Right. It's a little bit more of a strength bias, a lot of strict movement. A little bit on the heavier side, and also heavier is relative, right? Just like when I meant to say this before, same thing with intensity. Like, intensity is relative as well. Sure. What's intense for you is going to be different for me, which is going to be different than somebody who's new's coming in. Yep. Right. So that's kind of like that first quarter. Yeah, Jack and Tan, man, that takes me back.
Yeah, and then we sort of start expressing that strength in the next quarter through like a power cycle. So here we're talking about things such as focusing on cycling those barbells, right, or doing a lot of machine work with intensity. So interval type training.
Yeah, a lot of interval type stuff.
Running 400-meter intervals. Doing intervals on the rower, the bikes, and those sorts of things. We were kind of taking that strength and expressing it and developing that power, right?
Yeah, a lot of like power cleans over squat cleans.
Right.
A lot of maybe a little bit on the shorter side of the domain, and a lot of interval type work. Yeah, how powerful can we be in a relatively short period of time?
Yeah, Wednesday's workout was a great example of a thing like that, where you're doing 1.5 minute intervals, where you have X number of calories on the bike, and then you're maxing out handstand push-ups for the rest of that. That's a very power developmental type of workout because it's short intervals, very, very intense.
Yeah. All right, so that's kind of like in that late summer, fall months.
Yeah, right. Kind of summer goes into fall, we sort of move into that. And then sort of over the winter months, kind of leading up to the last quarter before the Open, we start focusing more on volume and endurance. So there's where we're talking about the longer domain workouts, the longer bikes, the longer rows. If we have nice weather, the longer runs. Or even like with barbell work, we can still incorporate that in, but it's just going to be higher rep, a little bit lower weight.
Yeah.
We're talking about those 15-plus minute type workouts.
Yeah. A little bit more volume based.
Yep.
And again,
building that engine building cycle. Right?
Yeah, we want to be able to move some weight for long periods of time. It's constant movement. Like we're always moving. Yeah. Whereas like I think a lot of times people think like heavier workouts are harder, and a lot of times they're not harder. Like that's almost like a skill, right? Like if you can move it or not, and like that heavy weight can be an excuse to slow down. Whereas if you have something a little bit lighter, you don't have that excuse. You got to go.
Right. Yeah. So here we're talking about like learning how to pace, those pacer type workouts, as opposed to working at a threshold the whole time.
Yeah. So. I like that. And then that leaves one quarter.
That's what we're in right now. We are doing the open prep that everybody's loving so much, right?
Yeah.
I probably hear 4 or 5 times a week. I hate that people hate me right now. So these open prep workouts, they're not necessarily the most fun workouts. These prior open workouts, they're hard, right? They're not the most fun, but what it's really doing is it's bringing everything together that we've been doing for the last better part of a year, and expressing it in a way that we're probably going to be tested with if you do decide to do the open here coming up. And so you want to be prepared for that test, right? There's nothing worse than trying to do an open workout when you haven't prepared for it, because it really will smack you in the mouth, right? So
I think two things that my thought is, like, one, I like them all. I have fun with all of them. I like hard things. I like doing hard things. So I want them to be like that. So I don't have a problem with that at all. I love you.
Well, thank you.
And that's just a story we need to make. I'm always big on the mindset side of things, where I want to make sure that I'm telling myself the right story in my head. Like if you tell yourself that you're going to hate this workout, or if you tell yourself you hate wall balls and you suck at them, when you do that workout, what's going to happen? Like, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So, like, it's meant to be hard. That's why you're here, right? They're supposed to be hard. So that's really cool. So what we mentioned, so that's kind of like our big overview. So, my big takeaway, the word we heard a lot there was open, right? And for our competition track, we have the 3 tracks. That makes a lot of sense. But if I'm in that train track, if I'm in that sweat track, so my goal is health and fitness. My goal is to be ready for, playing my intramural volleyball league, or it's, I need it for my job. I'm a police officer. Like, why do these cycles matter to me?
Well, the thing, first of all, let me address the open point. So really what makes an open workout isn't so much the workout. They're not that wildly different from a lot of the other things we do. It's how you approach it, right?
Yes,
the reason
exactly.
why the open workouts hurt so bad is because we're trying to do our absolute best, right? So
100%,
we put forth the most effort, So I'd say that's
it's going to hurt more,
Yeah, it's going to hurt, right?
Because you're trying harder.
Yeah, exactly. But for somebody who's trying to just be fit for life, I still think that whether it's the sweat track or a train track or a compete, you're just gonna still get equal benefit from this sort of modular approach to programming for the year, because again, it all feeds into each other. So whether you're a person who's on the sweat track just trying to be fit for life, again, it's still important that you're strong. You still have to pick up that 55-pound dog food bag, right?
Yeah.
Or that, what have you at home without hurting your back, right? So it's still going to be important to you. You still want to have, a good level of conditioning. If you want to go out and play soccer with your kids or throw the football around or whatever, you don't want to be gassed after 2 minutes, right? So it still applies, So as we've always said, whether you're, in your first month of CrossFit or you're a 10-year games athlete, it doesn't vary by kind, it varies by degree, right?
Yeah.
So we're all doing the same things because it all works to get you more fit. And, and I think that would be my key takeaway.
Yeah. So, these cycles let us put a little bit of focus on something, right? So, hey, we're going to get strong over the long period of time of doing GPP, but if we can spend a little bit more time on focusing on strength, like that, we're going to see a little bit more success. We're going to see that. Like, if you want to get somewhere faster, the answer is focus.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
So if we put a little bit more focus during that time, we can make some gains there. Yeah.
Yeah, so like in a typical open prep cycle, you might only see back squats or heavy deadlifts, once every 2 to 3 weeks, right? But that won't be the case in a strength cycle.
Right.
We'll see some heavy squatting every week.
Yeah.
We'll see some heavy deadlifting probably every week, right, for the most part. So so and as you said, when you're doing it every 2 to 3 weeks, you'll get stronger slowly over a long period of time. But that focus over a short period of time will give you those quicker gains.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So the last thing that we want to talk about is intention. I did a podcast on this a little bit, but I think it kind of, after going over like what we're doing while we're doing it, I think it can really help just kind of solidify what we should be thinking about when we're doing this workout, or what do we think about when we're doing workouts throughout the year,
and how we're planning out our weeks and even into that regard. So we all know that a robust CrossFit or functional fitness program, it's very demanding, right, on your body and your mind. And you have to make sure that you're not asking too much of yourself, right? You want to work out, have fun, and get fit. But I found in my experience that people sort of get a little bit of an addiction to this stuff, right? And they want to be here 6 days a week and working out hard and going as hard as they can every time they come in and all that sort of thing, which is great for a very short period of time, right? But it will ultimately catch up with you.
Yeah.
So the thing that I would say is, as you said, it was a great word you used, intention. Make sure that you have an intention every day. Make sure you have a purpose. Like, what is my goal for this day, for this week, for this month?
Yeah.
And do enough to meet that goal, but not too much, right?
Right.
Make sure you're taking your rest days. Make sure you're recovering well, sleeping well, eating good nutrition, super important. Try to avoid the too much of a good thing trap. We can all fall into that very, very easily. So if you and you and the coaches that you're working with or whatever, you agree that a 5-day program is good for you, make it 5 days, right? Don't sneak in that 6th day. Don't get caught up in that sort of junk volume where you're going to do an extra 100 pull-ups just because you have a spare 15 minutes, right? We try to incorporate everything into the programming that will get that well-rounded approach that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do some extra stuff, just be careful in implementing it. Certainly get some coaches' advice in terms of what to throw in there and that sort of thing.
And make sure there's like a reason behind it. Right. Like you're not just doing something to do it.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. One of the concepts is like we have practice, we have train, and we have compete. And that kind of lines up with the tracks kind of on purpose, right? So like if your goal is, if you're in that compete track, you actually should only be competing maybe once a week at most. Because what people can do is you can compete yourself out of shape, right? Yeah. Think about if you're training for a 5K and you just keep running a 5K the entire time. that's probably not how you're going to get your best score. What you're going to do is you're going to run some shorter stuff to build up your speed, right? And then you're going to do some longer stuff to work up on your endurance. You're going to do some shorter and some longer. You're not just going to do same thing like with sports. Like they don't just play games.
No.
For football, for example, right? What do? They warm up. They practice throwing. They practice tackling. They practice seeing things, right? They do their skill work, and then they'll come and do some of those scrimmages and that game environments type thing.
Absolutely.
So we don't want to be competing. Like there should be an intention for each workout each day, and the answer isn't just more volume. Like we're not games athletes. We're not. You have to build up to that. Like you just can't jump into it. It's something that you have to build up to over time and make sure you have an intention behind it.
100%.
Yeah.
100% agree.
Anything in closing?
I think that covers it for me. Oh yeah, one final thing that I would say, in line with what we're talking about. As demanding as this is, we're going to get some issues with our body, right? You're going to feel that sore shoulder. You're going to feel that sore back.
Yeah.
Don't ignore that, right? If your shoulder is bothering you and it hurts to do a movement, don't do that movement.
Yeah.
If your back is sore, don't come in and try to max out on a deadlift, right? Be smart about this sort of thing. It's not worth losing 3 months worth of training or more over one day, right?
Yeah.
Over one lift, or over one workout, right? So be smart, listen to your bodies. If you need to take the break, take it.
Yeah, I think I have a perfect example. Like I told almost everybody at the gym, I sneezed the other day and I pulled something in my side, right? And I gave it a little break, and then I was doing a Turkish get up, and I kind of made it a little bit worse. And then I came in and the next day, and it felt a lot better. And I tried to deadlift, and 135, I could deadlift it, but I could feel it. And then I tried to deadlift a little bit more than that. I think it was like 185 or 225. I can't remember what it was. And like I could have pulled it off the floor, but as soon as I like got some tension and felt it, I was like, nope. Like I could have done that workout, but I was like, that's not my goal. Like my prime directive is health and longevity. Right?
What would have been the intention of doing that in your case, right?
Right.
You'd have been doing it just to do it.
Yeah, it would have been ego. Yeah. It's like, oh, I can do this. I do 225. Right.
Yeah.
So I shut that down and be like, hey, I'm in this for the long game, and now I'm back and doing everything that I can do. So.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for
coming
me.
in.
Appreciate
We'll try and make this a little more of a commonplace. So, thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, let us know. Share it with somebody who you might think this helps. Remember, invest in yourself. Cheers.
See you guys.